So, good afternoon, everyone. Let's start our preparing, monitoring and evaluation for implementation deep dive session. My name is Béla Kézy, and for the rest of this 45 minutes, I will work for you on this topic. Well, those who know me, not just through the screen, but also see me in person, know that I'm a skinny guy by nature. And yeah, I would like to start with a story about this because I thought after lunch, starting such a complex topic might be too much. So let's start with something light touch. So I'm a skinny guy, and when I was younger, I was even skinnier, and I was embarrassed. I did not like it. I know, don't judge me. I was very young then. So I decided to do something about it and get bigger. So I spent time researching the topic, and after some time, I came up with a plan, an action plan of a sort. I had a very clear objective, mind you. I wanted to grow from my skinny 75 kilogram frame to a, well, still not impressive, but slightly better 80 kilogram. So I started to implement my plan, and I've been working hard, pumped iron in the gym 4 times a week, plus I did a couple of cardio sessions on the rowing machine. I was committed. I really wanted that. I did not miss a workout throughout the whole 6 months program. No surprise that at the end, I was very proud of myself, and I was excited to see my results. Now, I pulled out the scale from behind the desk. It was collecting dust since the start of my program. And, well, I stepped on it. Big smile on my face, full of anticipation. But then that big smile disappeared in a moment because I could not believe my eyes. The tip of the scale was stubbornly standing at 73 kilogram. Did I get stronger? Probably. Did I get fitter? For sure. Did I get bigger, which was my original objective? Not a bit. If anything, I was slightly smaller than when I started. I had been working extremely hard for 6 months, and from the perspective of my specific objective, it turned out it was for nothing. So I was disappointed, but did not give up. I have put together a new, slightly different program with the very same objective. And this program had just one important element that has nothing to do with weight, cardio, or dieting, but is very relevant to the topic of today's deep dive session. And I'm sure most of you already see why. So let's get started. There are 3 things I want to talk about today. A quick reminder, typical mistakes in monitoring and working with monitoring indicators and monitoring in action. Now, before we start, of course, it is important to understand the why. And I think my story starts to illustrate why we need to focus on and working with indicators properly. But I just would like to refer back to Ian's presentation, Ian's session, excellent session in the morning. He said something like this. I know this version of the quote, which was something like, no plan survives first contact with reality. Well, I know the military version, which is no battle plan survives first contact with enemy. And that's true for our action plans as we've seen it. I mean, on the left, there's the straight line we imagine your plan should look like. And then on the right, you can see this red, very sketchy line that illustrates how it could turn out. And then in the middle, there's a version that probably can be something that you can implement if you have a proper management and monitoring system in place. Because if you start from your starting point at the beginning of the arrow, and then you start to move, but you don't measure your results. So you move, and you get somewhere. And at the end, you try to measure your progress, and you realize that something's not right. Just like in my journey, in my story at the beginning, I'm not where I wanted to be. We are not where we wanted to be. So definitely, it is really important to measure from time to time on a regular basis, to track your progress, to see where you are. So if and when necessary, you need to adjust your plan, change your activities so that you still be able to achieve your objectives. Now, Ian was also talking about the 6 pillars of implementation. And well, as you can see, one of the pillars here is about management and monitoring. And that's exactly we will talk about briefly today. And I want to make it really specific so that you can use the things I'm showing to you while preparing your monitoring system and by working with your indicators. So the first issue to deal with is, let's go back a bit. We talked about this, but I think a refresher, a reminder is always useful. I'm sorry for always going back to the starting point, but it's important because if we don't get it right, then our monitoring system cannot be good enough, cannot work properly. And the starting point is the intervention logic. And you remember the intervention logic, I'm sure. In its simple form, it's basically about where are we at the moment? We have to understand clearly what is our problem, what is our situation. Then we have to have a clear view on where we want to be. So where do we want to go? What is the change we want to achieve? And then, of course, our plan details, how do we want to get there? Now, that's basically illustrated with an example. So if our problem is low number of new businesses launched by female entrepreneurs, and we want to see more new businesses launched by female entrepreneurs, we probably do, for example, something like setting up a business incubator supporting female entrepreneurs and lots of other things as well. Just for the sake of simplicity, I use this example. So we do this, we set up this incubator to achieve our objectives. So these are the things we have to be clear about. Where are we? Where do we want to go? And how do we want to get there? And that's basically what's in your action plans, which are already, I'm sure, uploaded to Basecamp. Yesterday was the deadline for uploading a draft version of your action plan. So I'm sure you all did it, and it's all there in the action plans, following this logic. So in terms of the how do we want to get there, of course, we talk about actions and outputs that will bring about the results we want to see. And this is a slightly more complicated version, which we call a results framework. And as you can see, here again, we have the situation, we have the change, we would like to see, we have a specific objective, intended results, and actions. And then we have monitoring and evaluation as an important tool. But let's go into more specifics, because I think it is important to speak about specific solutions to the problems you are seeing during your work. So the specific objective is the expression of the change the intervention aims to achieve. It's based on a problem, challenge, development need, and it's basically it's a very specific thing you have to be able to say. So it's something like increase the proportion of cycling at the expense of individual car use. So that might be your specific objective. And then you have to have a result indicator that measures your specific objectives, and you can use it to track your progress. The result indicator is a measure that captures the change in the situation addressed by the specific objective. And well, it contributes probably to your specific objective. So between the result and your specific, There's a link, a contribution, so you might contribute to achieving the change. You might not reach just with your actions, but your actions have to make a major contribution to your specific objective. Now, in terms of the output is contributing to your specific objective or result, and it's the direct output of your actions. And let me give you an example, continuing the same line. The new protected bike lanes between the residential area X and the city center. And of course, you want to measure that as well. So that's why you use an output indicator. The output indicator is a variable that describes the output your action will produce. And the target is the expected total from your action. So in this case, it's the length of the newly built protected bike lane. Okay, so these are some definitions. And you also probably remember the qualities of a good indicator. Good indicators are always specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. You have to have a time as well linked to it. And key ingredients of an indicator are precise definition. You need to define what is your indicator. So in this case, the example is the annual number of days with high or dangerous level of pollution, if you are talking about air pollution. But that's, of course, is not enough. We have to understand the baseline value, what it is today. So the baseline value in this case is 30 in 2022 or 2021 or 2022 if we are at the end of the year. And of course, we have to have a target value. Where do we want to be by 2025, which illustrates why time-bound is the indicator. And it's 15. So we want to reduce the number of days by 15 in 3 years. And we need to do many things to achieve that. And of course, we have to identify the source of information. Where do we find the information that is needed to measure our indicator value? And in this case, we are lucky because we have air quality statistics from the Regional Environmental Protection Agency, and we can use that because they are measuring the number of days with high or dangerous level of concentration. So as you can see, you have to have these 4 qualities in order an indicator to work properly. So when you start to think about an indicator, these are the 4 things, besides making it smart, as we heard, that you really want to keep in mind and really want to identify. Now, in the past couple of years, I've been working with lots of action plans and lots of people designing action plans. And I've seen lots of typical mistakes when working with indicators. And I think learning from mistakes is always an important thing, because next time we can avoid those mistakes, especially if we learn from others' mistakes. So that's what I try to do now. I set up 3 groups of typical pitfalls or mistakes I encountered with. The first one is related to the intervention logic, because as I said, intervention logic is really important. If you get it right, you are halfway there. So you have a good basis for your indicators. Then there is number 2 is indicator design. And last but not least, the design and use of your monitoring framework. So let's get into it. The first one is what I called solution camouflaged as a challenge. I see it quite a lot when you write something in your challenge section or description of the problem, lack of a business incubator. So basically what you are talking about here is lack of something, lack of a solution you definitely want to come up with. But the problem is not that. The problem is something that is a challenge, a problem to your target group. And maybe a lack of a business incubator is a problem, but here the problem is rather the limited supply of affordable space for new businesses. So that's the problem. And Why is it dangerous to write a specific objective like, a challenge like this, lack of something? Because you already implicate or imply the solution itself, so you don't have the possibility to think about possible solutions. You already have your solution in mind. So always be careful when you write something or see something like lack of something. It's probably something different, because if we say limited supply of affordable space for new businesses, then an incubator could be an answer, but also could be, for example, financial support provided to small and medium-sized businesses to get workspace for themselves, and so that they can pay for it, or any other thing. The next one is what I often see is that specific objective is what I call overambitious. And here's the example: increase average level of education. Well, that's a bit general, so not specific enough, but also quite ambitious if we are talking about an action plan. Maybe it would be better to say we want to reduce the number of early school leavers, school dropouts. Maybe that's a much better, much specific and less overambitious, much realistic specific objective. And then probably you have a better chance at achieving it. So it's always important to have a realistic specific objective, taking into account the time available, the resources you have, and the focus of your plan. Okay, there's another thing I often see, like specific objective is not relevant. So, for example, your problem is something like, young people leave the city, talented young people leave your city and they don't return. And then you say something, your specific objective is increasing birth rate. But in this case, probably you have something like increase the proportion of students staying in the city after graduation. It's more specific, it's more relevant to your problem, to your challenge, what you want to address. So make it really relevant to the challenge you want to address. Okay. Specific objective is not specific. That's another thing I often see. So if you have a problem with travel behavior, or if you want to have more people using more sustainable forms of transport or mobility, because that's a problem you are dealing with, lots of people driving their own cars, as in most cities we face this problem. You might say we want to change travel behavior of residents. But actually, it might be more specific to say that you want to increase the proportion of people commuting using bicycle and or public transport. I mean, changing travel behavior is really a noble objective, but it's difficult to measure. We don't really know what we mean by changing travel behavior. We have to really describe it if we use this, or, as I would recommend, make it a bit more specific and talk about increasing the proportion of people commuting using bicycle and or public transport, which really addresses your problem, but it's more specific and probably more realistic as well. Now, when you are talking about an action plan and you want to choose indicators, I often see also that the indicator is not defined precisely, which is a problem, because then you don't know what you need to measure. So I often see something like level of pedestrian safety. And true, you can actually set up a survey in which you are asking people about their perception of safety, and they can even evaluate it on a scale between 1 to 10, and then the average perception of safety. But what if you say something like that, number of road accidents resulting in pedestrian injury? That's more specific, fairly easy to measure. Probably you already have the data. And it's a good definition because now you know what you actually need to measure. The number of road accidents that result in pedestrian injury. Another mistake I often see, it's the same just with another example. For example, let's say the indicator is export capacity of SMEs. But how do you measure that? What is the export capacity of SMEs? Maybe you have a complex indicator, but maybe you don't. Maybe if you say that proportion of export revenue in total sales of SMEs, that's something you can measure. The data is available, hopefully, and that's quite specific. A specific definition that tells you what you need to measure when you are working with your indicators and tracking your progress. Yes, that's quite often happens as well, that in an attempt to make it specific, sometimes we use output indicators to measure results. So, for example, if you remain in this export example, and we now know that our indicator is the proportion of export revenues of total sales of SMEs, or at least that's a good indicator we might want to use. And still, we see things like number of SMEs participating in an export training, which measures perfectly your output if you have an export training delivered, but does not really measure your objective, which is, for example, increase the export capacity of your, or increase the export of your small and medium-sized enterprises. So don't use an output indicator to measure your results. Okay, and that's another one, which is, I think, important. Milestones are not identified. So you may say the number of road accidents you want to result, the number of road accidents resulting in pedestrian injury. It's about pedestrian safety. We've seen the example. We have a baseline value for 2021, which is 130, and our target for 2027 is 50. But what if we only have these two numbers? Of course, if we measure the baseline and then the target and nothing in between, well, we might have a problem because we might not progress properly toward our objective, our target value. But even if we measure from time to time, every year, for example, we check the data, if we don't have milestones set up with different intervals, we don't have anything to compare the actual value with. But if you have a milestone for example, the end of 2023, and it's 120, and then we measure the actual value and we see that it's 109, then we know that we are progressing properly. But if it's 129, then we might have a problem and we might need to look at our actions. We might need to adjust our action plan. So especially if it's a longer program, it's probably a very good idea to set up a couple of milestones with regular intervals so that you have data to compare your actual values to. I also see this one sometimes. Sometimes we try to set up a too sophisticated set of indicators. I mean, in the case of indicators and monitoring systems, my mantra is don't let good enough be the enemy, or don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough, because that's an important thing. It's basically impossible to set up a perfect monitoring system and a system of indicators. So don't try to make it too sophisticated. Make it just workable, something that you can use, that gives a feedback on your progress. Maybe it does not describe properly your progress, but that's probably not possible either. And typical problems regarding the set of indicators is data availability. Data is not available on the appropriate geographical level. Maybe you have the data on national level, but not on your city level, or data is not available in the appropriate breakdowns. So not for female and male users, for example, for certain indicator. Designing the perfect indicator requiring expensive and time-consuming survey to measure every time. That's also a mistake sometimes we commit. So we have a survey measuring an indicator. And we set up this survey at the beginning, and well, we set up this survey at the end to measure the baseline value and then the actual value, which we can compare to the target value. But actually, if we have milestones, for example, and we want to measure from time to time, then we have to do this survey again and again. It could be time consuming, it could be expensive, it could even be more expensive than the interventions we are, or close to it, the interventions we are implementing. So probably it's not a good idea to design the perfect indicator, which requires expensive and time-consuming survey from time to time. Of course, surveys sometimes are justified, but be careful with them. Or using too many indicators to measure results and outputs. That's also a mistake. The best rule of thumb for me is have one indicator for your result and one indicator for your output, one for every single output, of course. Maybe you need more than one, and that's perfectly okay if you need more than one. But I think the rule of thumb is try to solve it with one indicator. Okay, so it's quiz time. I set up 3 questions. You can see it here, and I would like to ask the support of the team to start the quiz. It's on Slido, and Slido is integrated in Hopin, so you can see it next to my presentation. So these are the 3 questions. Your specific objective is improve air quality in the city center. What result indicator would you use? You see the following result indicator: percentage of new businesses launched by female entrepreneurs. What could be the specific objective? And what output indicator would you choose to the following action: bike to school program for secondary school students? So let's see whether you were here with us and seen and listened to the presentation. So can we start the poll, the Slido? Can I have a feedback because I can't see it, unfortunately?
Hi, Béla.
Hi.
It started already, and I think people are answering now.
Okay.
But I think you cannot see it because you needed to refresh your page. But this is fine. The people are answering. So, do you want me to share the results for now? I mean,
if you can share the results, yes.
So just for now, it seems the most people indicated as an indicator annual number of days with high or dangerous level of pollution, and there are a few people mentioning annual number of pollution-related deaths and number of people reached with awareness-raising initiatives, but it's like 3% and 3%. Like 94% is the annual number of days with high or dangerous level of pollution.
Great. So that's basically most of you did answer the proper answer. But there's no perfect answer, but the best possible answer. And that means that you actually listened to what I said, because of course the solution was hidden in what has been provided. Okay, next one.
So the next one has been launched.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Béla tried to refresh his page. So in the meantime, so you see the following result indicator: percentage of new businesses launched by female entrepreneurs. What could be the specific objective? So would you put increase the proportion of new businesses launched by female entrepreneurs, launch a program to promote female entrepreneurship, and provide equal opportunities to women to set up businesses? I think I would put the first one.
I'm sorry,
No, don't worry. You refresh your
my
page.
page.
Yeah. So I was just reading the question, and myself, I'm answering increase the proportion of new businesses launched by female entrepreneurs. Maybe it's not the right one, but let's see what other people answered. I can. So actually, 65 people, 65% of people answered the same answer as me. So increase the proportion of new businesses launched by female entrepreneurs. 19% launch a program to promote female entrepreneurship, and 15% provide equal opportunities to women to set up businesses. I leave you jump in there.
Yeah, okay, just a second. So you see the following result indicator. Yeah, percentage of new businesses launched by female entrepreneurs, and the right answer is I think it was the first one. I'm sorry, I still can't see it, but my virtual camera is gone as well with the page refresh. So yeah. So the first one was, can you repeat, Clementine?
The first one, increase the proportion of new businesses launched by female entrepreneurs. We can now see that it's the right answer. So 68% of people answered this. And
Okay,
then,
great.
yeah.
Great.
So shall we move to the next question?
Yes, let's move to the next question.
Okay, so we have it. Do you want me to read?
Yes, please. I can't see it.
Okay, sorry for that. So we have, so what output indicator would you choose to the following action? Back to school program for secondary school students. So first one, you have number of secondary school students participating in the program, cumulative, number of secondary school participating in the program, percentage increase in bike use, proportion, percentage of cycling in modal split. So let me think about that. What would I would say, I don't know, maybe number, its output indicator, number of secondary school students participating in the program cumulative. I will answer that, and let's see what. Okay, so we have 64 people who answered the same as me. Then we have 15 people who answered number of secondary school participating in the program. We have 15% percentage increase in bike use, and we have 7% proportion of cycling in modal splits.
Okay, so basically, it's important to measure the actual output of your actions. If your action is a bike to school program, I think both could be acceptable. So the number of students or the number of schools participating. I prefer number of students because that gives a better measure of the real results, how many people actually participate in it. But as output indicators go, the number of schools could also work. Okay, so unfortunately, we have to continue slightly differently. Sorry about that. I was all kinds of technical problems all day today with the virtual camera setup. And as I refresh the page, my virtual camera gone. So I have to share my presentation instead of using the virtual camera setup. But yeah, just bear with me and Okay, that's not it, I know. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So the third topic I want to talk about very briefly is monitoring in action. So how we use what we learned so far. We have a plan, we have all the indicators properly designed. So how do we monitor progress indeed? So Before we go there, I think very quickly, a quick refresher about the comparison of monitoring, control, and evaluation, because sometimes we mix up the three things. For us, monitoring and evaluation is really important, and especially monitoring, because that's a management tool to track the progress in relation to the objective set and intervene if necessary, very important. Control is continuous review of processes and activities to prevent and eliminate irregularities. So it's a different thing, I think. And evaluation is, the purpose of the evaluation is to reveal the impacts of the interventions in relation to the challenge to be addressed. So evaluation can be done at different points of the implementation. The most well-known is ex-post evaluation, and it's mostly about learning the lessons. So we look back at the implementation of our program and our results, and we try to identify what went wrong, whether we achieved our targets, our objective, and how we might need to change things next time we do it. So when I evaluated my weight gain program, next time I did it better because I understood what went wrong. This is just a quick description of the differences between the three, where I don't go right now. I would continue here with this. So what you need to monitor your progress. You definitely need a clear intervention logic, as we understand, because without it, you probably will struggle with identifying indicators. Then you need indicators complete with definition, baseline, and target value and source of information. And then you need a description of your monitoring process. And it's important that it cannot be an afterthought. So it's not something you try to come up with when you start to implement your integrated action plan. It should be included already in your action plan. So the process, it should definitely, very briefly, so you might ask, what should I put in my integrated action plan besides the indicators? Well, it should be a short description of at least a simple process where you talk about responsibility. So who has overall responsibility for coordinating your monitoring efforts? Who is collecting data? And who is preparing the report? Then you should identify reporting requirements. So how often do you prepare a report? In what report? In what format? Content? Maybe you do it once a year and you have a special dashboard format. And to whom you are submitting that report. Maybe it's your URG, which continues working even after the URBACT project. And then you need to think about troubleshooting. So what happens if there's deviation from plan? Maybe URG comes together, tries to find the issues, the challenges, the problems, and amends the plan as necessary. So these are the things you might want to include in your integrated action plan. Now, your ideal monitoring system, there's no such thing. So there's no perfect monitoring system, but it's good if it's simple, inexpensive to run. So you don't need a special dedicated one person working full-time to run your monitoring system, especially if it's not a huge program. Maybe in big programs, you need that. Integrated with existing monitoring systems. So if your city, if your local authority has an already existing monitoring system, it's better to integrate with it. And it's good if it's visual and easy to understand when it comes to reports. And typical mistakes, non-existent or incomplete indicators, by all means, have your indicators defined in your integrated action plan. Not designed your monitoring system framework as part of your planning process. So please think about what I've said and try to identify those elements already in your integrated action plan. Overcomplicated, too much work to use, nobody will use it if it's so. Resources not dedicated, you still need some resources, and if these are not dedicated, nobody will really be able to do it, monitoring your progress. And sometimes long text-heavy scientific reports have a place, but in case of monitoring, it's better to have visual, simple to follow reports that can tell you at a glance what is the problem. And last but not least, I would like to say a couple of words about making results visible and communicating progress. You might think you use your monitoring report to make your results visible. You already have that report prepared. It's even slightly visual. So why don't you share it widely? Well, if your goal is to be transparent, that's a big thumb up. You really need to use it, make it available for people to see it, to follow your progress. If your goal is to make your results visible, it might not be the best solution to share your report. You can still share it, but you might want to think about other ways of communicating progress, as we've seen as an important element of the sixth pillar. Because not exactly all messages are created equal. So when you talk about improved air quality in the city center, or increase of renewable energy in the energy mix, or more jobs, when you say things like that to politicians or residents, these are things that probably resonate with them immediately. They know what it's about, they think it's important. But what if you say things like more female students in higher education engineering programs, or more inclusive public spaces for all ethnicities, or increase the proportion of cycling at the expense of individual car use, especially for car users? That's not a very positive message. So these messages, while important, they might not resonate with some of the target groups, especially decision makers, politicians, and or residents. So it's exactly, you might feel you know what to do, what you do is good for the community. You actually have the data, the indicators to prove that it's good. But they might not be equally convincing for your stakeholders. They might not understand what you are so happy about or proud of. So when you need to sell your results to various stakeholders, including especially the public and politicians, you may need to think slightly differently. First and foremost, you might need to understand their motivations and show what's in it for them. So you have to show it through the right narrative. So, for example, if we go back to the example of female engineering students, which is an important message in itself, but if you say that, well, we have lots of companies struggling with lack of engineers, and we want to solve that problem, and we are working on that, that's maybe something that resonates better. Or if you are talking about car use, then reducing car use might not be the best message. But if you say we want to make our streets safer for ourselves, for our kids, that may resonate better with your target groups. You need to tailor or frame your messages and choose channels according to the different target groups. And it's always good to tell stories, so you can show the journey of a human being affected by the intervention, before and after situation. It's quite often more powerful than cold numbers. And of course, it's always good to make it visual for such target groups. So, for example, you can use video instead of written text, especially if you try to tell a story of before and after story, even though it doesn't before and after story of one person who is affected by the benefits of your intervention, even though it does not describe the entire extent, the whole extent of the improvement you achieved, but still illustrates very well to your target groups why is it important and good what you did. So what now? Well, if you have a monitoring system and all the indicators in your integrated action plan, perfect. You don't need to do anything. But if something is not sufficiently good there, you may not have yet indicators, you may not have yet a description of your monitoring system, go back and revisit your integrated action plan. First and foremost, check your intervention logic and your specific objectives. If you have already identified, well, check your result indicators. It's always important to go back and think about them. Are they smart, complete with all the things you need to have? Then check your output indicators and plan how you will monitor progress. And then you will have something in your hand you can use actually during implementation as part of your action plan. And hopefully can help you to achieve your specific objective. Not like me in the first instance, in my first 6 months program, but like me in my second 6 months program, but I actually achieved my objective. So I managed to, get slightly bigger, not too big though. Any questions? I know time is running out, but I'm quite happy to try to answer questions if there's any.
Yeah, I think we can, like the next session are starting at 3, so we can still take a few minutes to get some questions. And what I noted down is for the first part of your presentation about more the indicators. I think people are still thinking about that at the moment. And so like there was a point from Eleni, like regarding, mistake that you do, like when setting up your indicators is like to define an indicator where actually you don't have the proper source of data, of information to answer this indicator. And there was as well a question from Annika about how to avoid being too superficial. When designing your, if I get that right, when you define your indicators, because like you tend to have only actions that are measurable, while it's not easy to quantify everything. You see what I mean? I mean to And then another question, and then I'll leave you answer, is that there was a point from Ian Turner from Zero Carbon Cities, who was asking, it was more for the monitoring system. What do you do? What should you do when your results are not the one that you expected? And, for instance, if politicians are a bit reluctant to share bad results. So that was his question.
Okay. So the first question, thank you, Clementine. The first question was about source of information, if I understood correctly. So basically, as I said, it's useful. I mean, if at all you can, try to find indicators that you understand the source of. So there's an existing source, maybe it's part of the statistics locally or nationally. It's measured on a regular basis. So all you have to do is just pull the data, the actual data out of the statistical system. Of course, you can still face problems like the data is not available at the time when you would need it, but comes later. That could be a problem of statistical systems. But still, it's useful to have indicators that are already being measured. If that is not true, well, you need to think about measuring the indicator yourself. So come up with an indicator that you measure. It could be a survey indicator, for example. So you do a survey within your target group and try to understand the actual values. As I said, that could be useful if you don't overcomplicate it, if you don't make it very expensive, then it could be a good solution. But then you might run into the problem that is, I think, implied in Annika's question, that you might have a superficial thing. So you measure something, but it's not really reflecting the whole story, the whole picture. And there's one thing I haven't talked about in my presentation, and that's the distinction between quantitative and qualitative indicators. So sometimes you want to use qualitative indicators. I mean, I always argue for if only you can find something that measures more or less what you want to track, then try to use a quantified indicator, a number, because it's easy to compare, it's easy to follow, it's easy to understand at a glance the change in number. But true that it could be too superficial. So in that case, I always recommend trying to find a combination of quantified indicator and quantitative indicator and qualitative indicator. So you might have a number which gives kind of a superficial picture, But then you go deeper and use a qualitative indicator. So you use, for example, observation, you talk to people, you use narratives to understand about, for example, if you want to increase safety, of course, the number of accidents is an important thing, but also you may want to understand the perception of safety, and the perception of safety is not something that is easy to measure, but it's still important. I mean, it's not enough that we reduce the number of accidents. It's also important that people actually feel safer. And in this case, you might want to use some qualitative indicators as well. And the last question was that what happens if the results are not nice? Well, that's, but I think there can be two things. If you actually notice during using your monitoring system that you are not progressing towards your objective or not progressing in quickly enough towards your objective, then of course you have to intervene. You have to look back of your actions, of your activities. You need to understand what might be the reasons behind of not progressing sufficiently. And if it's something you have power over, so you can do something with it, you might want to adjust your program so that you put your action plan back on track and then move towards your objective properly. That's the important part of your monitoring system. So you measure, you see there's a deviation, and then you intervene when you can. It's not always possible. It could be something like a COVID pandemic that actually changed everything. But if it's possible, if you can adjust your actions, if you can adjust your interventions, by all means, do that. So that should be part of your monitoring system. That should be why you use monitoring, so that you can intervene. It can also happen that the results are not nice. You implemented your program, you tried to do everything right, and the results are not what you expected, not nice. Well, in this case, I don't know, it's difficult. I agree. Especially if you want to communicate that I'm sorry, we did that, we achieved this, we wanted to achieve something different, but we did not. Well, you have to find ways to explain to people and politicians what are the reasons behind that. And that's where, for example, evaluation can come in handy, because evaluation can actually show you that you did everything right, but there was an external event or something that resulted in that negative result. So yeah, that's very quickly.
So thanks a lot, Béla. There are other questions, but unfortunately, we will need, and the technical team needs to move to other session. But what I suggest, I mean, if Béla, you're available, is to look a bit through, scroll up a bit in the chat, and to answer directly to question in the chat, if that's fine, if it's fine for you.
Yeah, that's fine for me. I hope I can see the questions. Okay.
So in any case, the other sessions are like the Meet the Funders and the Fireside Talk. There are 2 Meet the Funders and 1 Fireside Talk. It's starting in 5 minutes in the session area. So in the same sense, if you just go to the session space, you will see them. And before you go, don't forget to rate this session. We would be interesting to know about your impression, and it's in the polls tab. And I'll let you, Béla, answer the question in the chat. Okay. And thanks a lot, Béla. There were a lot of positive feedback from the chat.
Thanks a lot, and sorry for the technical problems.
It was great.